Welcome to the podcast for Westside, a Jesus Church. We hope this teaching encourages and empowers you to love, learn, and live the way of Jesus.
Turn with me, this is tough. I'm sorry to do this to you. Turn with me to Genesis 1:1. I was a hanging curveball. I just set up the tee. I threw a melon at you. Genesis 1:1, that's easy to find. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to really plumb the deeps. This is going to be a lot of bass, not a whole lot of treble. And by that, I mean, we're not going to skim a lot off the top. We're going to kind of go straight to the depths. So this is going to be maybe something that will require us to put our thinking caps on. It's going to be a different kind of message as I talk about restoring wonder from the scriptures. So just buckle up for this one. Here's the thing. Culture eats ideology for lunch. Whatever your ideology is, that is subjected to whatever culture you're a part of. So if you go to Switzerland, God tends to look like a banker. Not only were they neutral in World War II, but that's where financiers and tycoons and titans of industry and Fortune 500 companies invest their money because it's known for banking. So God tends to theologically look like a banker in Switzerland. Then if you go to Germany, God tends to look like a police officer. Not only did you have the Third Reich, but you have this law and order regime that is militant, that kind of has its roots in the history of Germany. So if you go to Switzerland, he tends to look like a banker. If you go to Germany, he tends to look like a police officer. If you go to America, God tends to look like a businessman and a capitalist. Why? Because we are a capitalist society. And what I want to tell you is, regardless of what culture we're a part of, that does not dictate the divine Godhead. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And there's two real themes that, this is like a truth that runs through the thesis thread that runs through the treatise of truth in the Bible, is these two ideas I see cropping up and popping up, stopping by and dropping by over and over again in the Bible. It's that God is strong and God is loving. That's what the psalmist said. Simplicity after complexity. The sticky idea, the psalmist, after going through the deep, said, you know what? Two things I know, that you are strong and that you love me. First of all, before we get into the strength and power of God to restore wonder in our lives, we need to remember the love of God, which also renews the wonder into our lives. The fact of the matter is, you can't necessarily look at creation and see an inherent fundamental idea, an ideal of God's love, because survival of the fittest is happening. When you see deers get run over, well, I don't know if you have deers in Portland, but where I live, you know, I'm going out to church and I see a guy run over a deer. And I'm like, something isn't right about this scene. When you look at the world, there is a lot of violence in the animal kingdom. And how do we get this idea that God is loving? Well, believe it or not, it was actually the Christian tradition that introduced to the West the idea that God is loving and making that a main point. Not like a subtext, but really putting that on full display. It was the gospel that really caused collective consciousness in the West to be aware of this idea that, wait, God is loving. It's a truism now when you say God loves you, but when the early Christians of the way, the sect of the Nazarene, came onto the scene and said God is loving, this was a newfangled, subversive, fresh idea. Are you tracking with me so far? So it's the gospel that effectively shows us this huge reality that God is loving. And then in everything you see Jesus doing, he's showing the love of the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father, he said. He said, greater love has no man than this, than that he lays down his life for his friends. And yet Romans 5 says, when we were his enemies, he died for us. So he said, the greatest love you can have is laying down your life for your friends. And yet Paul said, Jesus actually died not just for his friends, he even died for his enemies, which means Jesus surpassed his own definition of the greatest love. No wonder Paul said that you would know the height, width, breadth, length, and depth of the love of God, which passes knowledge. His love is profound. His love is so profound that he would literally go up to the religious establishment and call them whitewashed tombs. 6,000 Pharisees at the time. There were no more than 6,000 Pharisees at any given time. He pits himself against the assembled might of Jewish orthodoxy and says to the pastors of his day, you are whitewashed tombs. He said, you are sons of your father, the devil, and you go across land and sea to convert people to make them twice as much sons of hell as yourself. Cooked. Who was he talking to? Not prostitutes, not tax collectors, not sinners. He was talking to religious people because he was so passionate about getting the religious yoke off of people to give them the love of God in its stead. By the way, I don't know if I've said this here before because I forget, but basically, when somebody comes to me and like, brother, I have a hard truth to lay on you. This isn't easy for me to share, brother, but I have a burden on my heart. And I just got to share with you the truth. You got to stop skating so much. Immediately I say, no thanks. Like, why don't you want to listen to my rebuke, brother? Well, because everything you just said is Antichrist. First of all, you're quoting the Old Testament saying, I have a burden on my heart, the Christianese, when really, Jesus said, if you're carrying burdens, come to me and I'll give you rest. Second of all, you said this isn't easy for you to share, but I'm pretty sure Jesus said my yoke is easy. But you're saying this is hard for me to share. Thirdly, you're saying this is a heavy truth, but Jesus said, my burden is light, not heavy. You're like, but I'm speaking the truth in love. Well, it's not loving how you're saying it. And second of all, the truth that you're sharing to me is binding me up. And Jesus said, you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. So if it's not setting you free, it's not the truth. Come on. When you know the love of God, it sets you free. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who will point out the proverbial crumbs in the metaphorical mustache, and we need those people who show us our blind sides. I get that. But at the same time, I think when religiosity can creep into the church, we forget the reality of the eternal idea that was represented and introduced by the gospel that God is loving. So Jesus subverts religion. You remember when 7 times in 4 gospels he heals on the Sabbath day. They would debate among the religious communities, when you're practicing the Sabbath, are you allowed to carry, well, you're not allowed to carry a burden. Moses said that in Exodus 20. So if you're wearing a wig, that's technically a burden. They actually debated this. This is real. You can read this. They said if you have a false limb, isn't that technically carrying a burden? If you have dentures in your mouth, you're carrying false teeth in your mouth, that's a burden. They would even debate, can you lift your child on the Sabbath day? Because that's technically carrying a burden and work. And they said, you definitely are not allowed to heal a non-life-threatening disease. So what does Jesus do? 7 times in 4 gospels, he heals purposefully and deliberately on the Sabbath. And I love how sometimes he would do it in synagogues. He went into church, he's like, watch me break rules. Jesus was the best rebel of all time. And one of my favorite healings of Jesus in the stories of the narrative arc of the Bible on the Sabbath day was when he healed a blind guy with spit. You see, back then, they believed that spit had curative medicinal properties and could heal people. If that were true, I would heal the front row every time. The Roman historian Tacitus tells the story of the emperor Vespasian who actually healed a sick guy with his spit because they believed that spit could cure sickness and disease, which ironically we still subliminally might believe today, because if you burn your hand on a stove, what's the first thing you do with your finger? You stick it in your mouth and you put spit on it. So they believed spit could heal people. Jesus, perhaps aiding the man's faith, spits in the dirt, and the Bible says at least 2 times, maybe even 3, that Jesus, watch this, he made clay. Specifically on the Sabbath, he made clay, put it in the man's eyes, and in the story, the man sees. Now watch. Why did the author go out of his way to point out that Jesus used his spit to make clay to heal on the Sabbath against the Pharisaic rules to introduce the love of God? Watch. Because for 400 years, the Israelites did not have even one Sabbath day. Every day, for century after century, what were they doing? Making clay. Why? To build Pharaoh's pyramids. Subsumed by systemic oppression and empire, they actually made clay for 400 years without any rest. So Jesus, the Lord of the Sabbath, says, come to me and I will give you rest. Hebrews says, enter into the rest. Let me make clay for you so you don't have to. I'm going to speak the truth that sets you free, which is what the whole Exodus is about, slaves getting set free, because when you rest, I work. I mean, I think we dropped bars, but I don't know. I heard crickets just now. What I'm saying is the Lord is showing through making clay, when you rest, I work. But when you work, I rest. He wants you to be a recipient of his love that is not predicated upon your works. It is fully contingent on God's grace. I was telling a group this, where my home church is that I teach at this morning in Southern Oregon. But you remember when Jesus in John 13, he washed his disciples' feet. The Bible says he put on a girdle, which is really fascinating because culturally, wealthy estates, they would have a slave girl that would wash the feet of the guests who entered. And when you wore a girdle, that was a slave's attire. I'm gonna paint with broad strokes here, but if somebody has a uniform and a badge, they're a police officer. Somebody has a blue collar, mechanic, white collar, businessman, jersey, basketball player, apron, chef. When you wore a girdle back then, everyone knew, oh, you're a servant. Jesus puts on a girdle, John tells us, to wash even Judas's feet as Judas's slave girl. He makes himself of no reputation, though he thought it not robbery to be equal with God. He took on the form of a servant and actually washed his disciples' feet. Now, the interesting thing about that is, in Revelation chapter 1, John, using this apocalyptic literature, talks about Jesus in heaven wearing, watch this, a girdle of gold. Now, gold is a king's metal. That's why gold, frankincense, and myrrh, the wise men, the magicians from the east, gave gold to Jesus to admit he was the coming king. Gold is a king's metal. So when it says in Revelation that Jesus is wearing a girdle of gold, girdle, slave's garb, attire, apparel, article of clothing, slave, gold, the article of a king, the king's metal, it's saying Jesus to this day is a servant king in heaven. And so often I say, Lord, how can I serve you? And he says, actually, let me serve you. He's a servant king in heaven. I'm chill with the Almighty and I'm besties with the Maker. NBD. That's our reality. So I need to emphasize this as we get into our text. God is loving. We've talked a little bit about the love of God. And it's the love of God that restores wonder to our lives, but it's also the power of God. What I want to do today as we look at Genesis 1, first, for the first part of today's study, we've considered the love of God. He washes my feet. The servant king in heaven makes clay so that when I rest, he works. The gospel introducing the ideology of the love of God that is not predicated on culture. Now what I want to do is I want to talk about how we can restore wonder to our lives by considering his power in creation through science. Now, we're going to go pretty crazy here, so just stay with me. But let's take a look at this, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. This is so big when considering the power of God. Listen, we are so jaded. We commit suicide once every 40 seconds, 123 suicides per day. Millennials, centennials, post-millennials, Gen Z, Gen Y, the most depressed generation on record. We are jaded. We are cynical as a generation. But we are going to change that. We are going to change this rock. We're on a mote of dust in a sunbeam, hurtling through space at 67,000 miles per hour. Our generation is the most depressed ever, but we are going to change this from a mope generation to a hope generation because we are hope dealers. That's who we are. We are lumps of sunshine. We're the light of the world. We're the salt of the earth, lending flavor to life. We're going to show the love of God and the power of God and show people the wonder of existence. As we pass through the wardrobe, Mr. Tumnus is hopping around. You're in Hogwarts, you muggle. When you study the creative acts of God all around us in the universe while considering, in conjunction with that, the love of God, you can't help but be filled with wonder. I want to live with wonder, childlike. Jesus said, if you want to enter my kingdom, become like a child. Have you lost your childlike wonder? Are you no longer excited about life? Have you become jaded and cynical, believing like the Stoics, the universe is cyclical? Genesis 1, verse 1 is for you. Let's take a look. Are you guys doing okay so far? Okay. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis, remember, is not like written as a science textbook. It's actually written as a poem. And it starts off this way. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, there's some fascinating stuff that goes on just in this verse. First of all, notice the word created. In the beginning, God created. Now, that Hebrew verb, create, is used only of divine and never of human activity. Because humans cannot ex nihilo, bara, create something out of nothing, John 1. Only God can create something out of nothing. We as Homo sapiens have never been capable or had the intellectual capacity to create something out of nothing. In fact, growing up, I listened to this band called Switchfoot, if you guys remember them growing up, if you grew up in the church. And the songwriter, I think, is genius. His name's John Foreman. He said, when he was asked how he wrote his songs, he said, I don't write songs. He said, I discover artifacts and dig them up and present them to people. Because every great songwriter knows. That's why like Lennon and Dylan, when they're asked by reporters, where do your songs come from? They just crack jokes. No, they don't know. First of all, when's the muses sing? Where do they come from? The Spirit's like the wind. We don't know where he came from or where he's going. This inspiration is like a lightning bolt from a clear sky. But what artists also know is when you create a magnum opus, a PSA de resistance, a tour de force, a masterpiece, when for example, what's the guy's name who painted A Starry Night? Van Gogh. When Van Gogh painted A Starry Night in the 1800s from an insane asylum, it's like, where did that come from? But even though these works are inspired, watch, all these artists are doing is, whether they're musicians, they're reassembling vibrations, or whether you're an artist, you're rearranging particles of matter to present a work of art that is not creating something out of nothing, it's just rearranging what pre-existed. By the way, fun fact. You know how in the Psalms, they're constantly talking about music, like the harp, for example? Why was music such a big part of Hebrew culture in the Old Testament? Even in the New Testament, one of the last things Jesus did before he was crucified is he sang a hymn. Paul the Apostle even instructed people to sing spiritual songs. Like, this worship today was fire. And I'm like almost crying when we're worshiping. I'm like, this is so good. Have you ever noticed that humans do not wholesale altogether hate music? I've never met somebody who's like, I hate music on principle. Now, you might hate Indian sitars. You might hate pop music. You might hate country music. You might hate jazz music. It's been said, jazz musicians play 1,000 chords for 3 people. Pop musicians play 3 chords for 1,000 people. Now, I don't know what genre of music you like. Nobody hates music as a whole. You just might not like certain genres. Why? There's a neurological reason you like music. All of music, even Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and orchestral classic music, is based on rhythm. So one of the chief proponents of a musical arrangement in theory is rhythm. It's predicated on a beat. And so what happens is your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for creative thinking that is most active immediately after you wake up. That's why if you do creative work, you want to do it in the morning, because that's when your prefrontal cortex boots up into its highest intellectual capacity. But your prefrontal cortex loves to make predictions and be correct. Watch this, which is why you like tap your foot when you hear music subconsciously without meaning to. That's why you clap your hands. That's why you snap your fingers without perhaps even thinking about it, because your prefrontal cortex loves to make predictions and be correct. So whenever you hear music, you're predicting the upcoming beat subliminally, and you are therefore celebrating your own ability to successfully predict the upcoming rhythm. So when you clap your hands, you're like, I'm really good at this whole rhythm thing. Your prefrontal cortex loves that. But be that as it may, I kind of got off track there. Creating. Okay, only God can create something out of nothing. Songs are just rearranged vibrations. Only God, ex nihilo, bara, creates something out of nothing. Are you tracking with me so far? Now, there are 3 words that I also want you to focus on in this verse to restore wonder to our lives. These 3 words, beginning, heavens, earth. Everyone say beginning, heavens, earth. Now, beginning is a measurement of time. The heaven speaks of outer space, and the earth speaks, obviously, of matter, of our world. This has actually been called the Trinity of Trinities, this verse. Would everybody say Trinity of Trinities? It has 3 aspects in one verse, but each one of these 3 aspects has itself 3 subsets. So follow. The beginning is a measurement of time. The heavens speaks of space. Earth speaks of matter. Watch. The beginning is a measurement of time, which itself contains 3 properties: past, present, future. The heavens speaks of outer space. Space contains 3 elementary, rudimentary properties called height, width, and depth. And matter also has three manifestations, which is solid, liquid, gas. Awesome job. So you have time, space, matter, past, present, future, height, width, depth, solid, liquid, gas. The trinity of trinities all in one verse, summed up in Genesis 1:1. So Moses was like, we're going straight to the deeps, we're not messing around. But here's what's so fascinating to me about how God created everything. I want to consider this with you. Psalm 146, this is so important, is an echo chamber for Genesis 1. When the psalmist says, happy are those people whose God is the Lord, whose hope is found in the God of Jacob, whose help comes from the Lord, who made heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. The hope, the help, the happiness that the psalmist found in the source, the prime mover, the ground of being, ultimate reality in God himself. It was founded upon this idea that God created the heavens, the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. When you consider God's creation, it really does kindle and awaken wonder. Let's just consider the seas that he made. Did you know that the earth is 71% covered in water? And 95% of Earth's waters, watch this, are unexplored. So the anglerfish and octopus and great whales, etc., these animals have only been discovered in the 5% that humanity has explored. So a lot of people think NASA is all about exploring other planets, but one of the chief planets NASA is still exploring is planet Earth, because our planet is largely unexplored. The ways of God are past finding out, the psalmist and Job both said. Now watch this. God creates the heavens, he creates the earth, he creates all of matter. Now, when Isaac Newton came onto the scene, he made things seem pretty simple. Everything goes according to law and order, mathematical equations. Then, several hundred years after Newton entered the stage of history, we discovered what even Epicurus, the philosopher, was searching out, and that is the idea of atoms. We finally discovered the Legos, like the building blocks of the universe. In the 1800s, very recently in human history, our microscopes became powerful enough to discover this earth that God made, which is made up of matter, and matter is made up of atoms. Now, here's where we're gonna go kind of deep. So are you guys okay? Can we just go? Okay. This just makes me filled with wonder. Now, when I go into this, some of you guys won't believe me. And I just want to say this because I'm going to be honest. I got really bad grades. I got a 2.0 grade point average. My teachers didn't know how to teach a creative genius. I'm joking. I'm not a creative genius. I just got bad grades. I don't have an alphabet after my name. I don't have as many degrees as a thermometer. I have as many IQ points as the Cleveland Browns put on the scoreboard. It's just bad news bears. Okay, so I'm not the brightest crayon in the box, that's the truth. But over the past few years, God has just really, I believe, pressed on my mind this just fascination and curiosity with astrophysics and quantum mechanics. So this stuff is like very deeply researched. You can look it up if you want, but the good news is I did all the work the past few years to hand it to you. It's gonna be hard to believe, but track with me, this universe is far more bizarre than we imagined. Let's just look at atoms, right? So God creates the earth, atoms. Everything in the universe is made up of atoms. Don't trust atoms. They make up everything. Okay, I see you. Okay. So everything in the universe is made up of atoms. Watch this. Atoms are 99.9% empty space. If you take all the empty space out of all the atoms in the universe would fit inside a sugar cube. This is well-documented science, watch. You say, how do we even accrue mass if everything is made of atoms? Atoms are 99.9% empty space. Take all the empty space out of all the atoms in the universe, and the universe fits inside a sugar cube. How do we even have material existence? Well, we didn't know until Albert Einstein came onto the scene. You see, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the universe is moving. Okay, so it's not just that the planet's spinning and our galaxy is moving, but the universe itself is expanding. This is called galactic dispersal. Everybody say galactic dispersal. Job says he spans the universe with the palm of his hand, but the universe is actually expanding as we speak, and we can tell how far away galaxies are from planet Earth based on this astrophysical phenomena called red shift. Now, when galaxies are moving away from you, the color will be red shift, because you're seeing the ultra-red light. If it's coming toward you, that's called blue shift. You're seeing the ultraviolet light. But we know that all galaxies are moving away from all the other galaxies at the same time. Galactic dispersal, the universe is on the move. Now, you know how if you hear an ambulance siren, like even today on my way here on the 5, there was an ambulance, and I didn't even see it, but I could hear it based on the cacophony of its sirens. So based on like the fading sounds of an ambulance siren, you can basically gauge how far away it is just by sound waves without even looking at it. In the same way, scientists use not sound waves, but light waves, UV or ultra-red light, so they can kind of gauge and measure how far away galaxies are from us. Now, through redshift, we know how far away galaxies are from us, how fast the universe is expanding. But if you run those mathematical models of galactic dispersal backwards many years, the universe condenses into what scientists call the initial singularity, which was there at the beginning. It was a compressed point of infinite density where the 4 fundamental laws of physics, the strong and weak nuclear forces, electromagnetism, and gravity, all fit in a space, watch this, smaller than a sugar cube. Energy and matter were the same thing. Time didn't even exist. That's what they speculate. It wasn't like the clock was ticking, nor was the clock not ticking. There was no even notion of time in the initial singularity. It was an infinitely condensed model of eternity. Watch. The initial singularity then exploded. This is what even secular scientists are telling us, and everything came into existence, and the universe is still on the move since that explosion. But watch. It was in the 20th century that Albert Einstein discovered how we accrue mass. If everything is empty space, which Einstein clearly demonstrated, then how do we even have material existence? It's because, watch this, there is a universal invisible field called the Higgs field, against which our body's particles rub up. It rubs up against this universal invisible field called the Higgs field. It then creates quantum drag to slow down our body's particles from light speed, wherein we accrue mass. So scientists are talking about a place of infinite creativity where there was no time, which exploded everything into existence, thereby creating an invisible, omnipresent field against which we rub up to create quantum drag for our body's particles to slow down from light speed, therefore accruing mass. Maybe Paul was right when he said, in God we live and move and have our being. Do you know what ticks me off? People think, well, do I believe in God or science? God is not at war with science. God invented science. That's like saying, do I believe in God or do I believe in love? God is love. This is not a binary construct that run diametrically opposed directions. There's a symbiotic resonance between the two. So this is very similar to what Genesis 1 is saying. God created everything. He exploded everything into expansive existence. Now watch. This is where it gets crazy. So your atoms, 99.9% empty space. The atoms that make up your body are very, very small. There are more atoms in a glass of water than there are glasses of water in all of the oceans combined. Let's put it another way. For you golfers, how many of you golf here? Anybody golf? Me neither, I don't have the patience for it. Okay, an atom is in size to a golf ball, as a golf ball is proportionately in size to planet Earth. An atom is in size to a golf ball proportionately as juxtaposed against a golf ball in size to planet Earth. Let me put it to you this way. If you blew up an atom to the size of a stadium, its nucleus, made up of protons and neutrons, would be the size of a grain of rice. Again, it's mostly empty space. So if you blew up an atom to the size of a stadium, its nucleus would be the size of a grain of rice, but watch, the grain of rice would be heavier than the stadium itself. This is called quantum mechanics. It's the study of atoms and subatomic particles. Watch. Niels Bohr, the famous quantum physicist, said, if you are not outraged upon hearing about quantum theory, you don't know what's being said. We've identified more than 150 subatomic particles, and one of the weirdest subatomic particles are these things called electrons. An electron, unlike we were taught in school, that it orbits around the nucleus of protons and neutrons in the atom, that's fine if you're like a little kid trying to teach it to them, but it's actually much more complicated than that. What an electron is actually doing is it is leaping from point A to point B without traveling the distance in between. This is called quantum leap, a quantum leap. Really, it's just the beam me up Scotty teleportation particle, but physicists don't have the guts to call it that. It's like we need to have some sort of justifiable apology for talking about teleporting atoms. People are like, when are we gonna teleport? You're behind the curve. Electrons have been teleporting for a long time. They literally leap from point A to point B. It's called quantum leaping without traveling the distance in between. It's a cloud of possibilities that doesn't reveal the path it took until after observed. In fact, did you know that merely by observing an atom, you can bring its subatomic particles into existence? There's a theory that the universe itself cannot exist unless it's being observed because the universe is made up of atoms. C.S. Lewis hit on this. He said, we never know what the universe is doing when we turn our back to it. So how are the nether reaches of space even existing if there's no one to observe its atoms? Well, that actually is a pretty strong apologetic for God. Hebrews says, all things are naked and exposed before his eyes. So he is the ever-present observer who brings the far reaches of space into existence when we aren't observing them. Now that's just theory, but the fact is, electrons, watch this is a fact, jump from point A to point B without traveling the distance in between. We have found electrons, watch, this is nuts, that do not face the front when you turn them 360 degrees. For that to happen, you have to turn them 360 degrees twice for them to face the front. Now I feel dizzy. Here's the thing. We're gonna keep going with this, just hang with me. A single electron can do 47,000 laps around a 4-mile tunnel in 1 second. We have found subatomic particles, watch this. I need a drum roll, a physical drum roll, this is too nuts. Nutter Butter 9,000 vibes. There are subatomic particles that are everywhere and nowhere at the same time, pop into existence out of nowhere, and can be two places at the same time. Quantum mechanics. Now, there's a thing called quantum entanglement, or the technical term is also communication, where if you turn a subatomic particle in LA, it will also turn a subatomic particle in New York in the exact same way. They are mirroring each other with no signal or line of communication, no pulse. Scientists are still baffled. How are these subatomic particles demonstrating awareness of each other from vast distances, even across the country? They can mirror each other, show awareness of each other with no pulse or signal. That's like me calling a friend in Zimbabwe, and I'm in the Sahara Desert, and neither of us have service on our phones, but we're FaceTiming. You would say in order to communicate, you have to have a signal, yet these subatomic particles have no signal. They're demonstrating awareness of each other. One of the theories is, scientists still don't know, is that they're leaping through micro wormholes. And they're actually leaping through little wormholes to different parts of the country. If that's true, then maybe one day if we could create macro wormholes, we'll be able to go to the far reaches of space and discover other galaxies. Because right now the other galaxies are way too far away. Even if we were traveling at light speed, it would take us forever to get there. So you're looking at the subatomic world, which is filled with particles that are everywhere and nowhere, teleporting, leaping from point A to point B as a cloud of possibilities, communicating with each other with no signal attached, ex nihilo, coming into being out of seeming nothingness. And yet it could fit inside a sugar cube if you took all the empty space out of these atoms. Let's come up to the surface. Werner Heisenberg, he said, the first sip of the natural sciences will make an atheist out of you. But God is waiting for you at the bottom of the glass. Yeah, when you study Newtonian physics, you might say, oh, I don't know, this seems pretty mindless. Then when you look at the world of quantum mechanics and you say with Niels Bohr, I am outraged upon learning about quantum theory, and Werner Heisenberg, who discovered the uncertainty principle, a quantum physicist who found that you cannot predict both the position and momentum of a quantum particle simultaneously, the first sip of the natural sciences will make an atheist out of you, but God is waiting for you at the bottom of the glass. Suddenly we're in Hogwarts. Suddenly we pass through the wardrobe. Suddenly we're seeing these teleporting particles that exist everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Two places simultaneously. We rub against the Higgs field, which gives reality to our being, slowing down our particles from light speed. We say, okay, this thing is way too magical to not think there's some, wizard behind the whole veil there in Oz. Are you tracking with me at all so far? I told you today would be a little different. Big stuff. As I close, we see the wonder in God's love. But we also see the wonder in science when you see, wow, God, how you even created atoms is so magical and miraculous. But thirdly, we see the wonder in outer space. Oh, I love outer space. How many of you have seen Interstellar? Does anybody like Interstellar? Oh, so good. I love outer space. The psalmist said, when I consider the heavens, the work of your fingers, the sun, moon, and stars, which thou hast ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him? In one verse, it says, God creates the heavens. Man, the heavens are amazing. At night, on a perfectly clear night, there are 6,000 stars visible to the naked eye. But there are actually more than 100 billion stars in our galaxy. And billions of other galaxies are known. 96% of the universe is unknown and perhaps unknowable, made up of dark energy, dark matter, and black holes. This universe is filled with mystery and wonder. People who walk around like they have it all figured out, it just ain't true. It's been said, science is not bragging about what we know, it's just learning to ask better questions. Like, we're just admitting how much we don't know. And the fact of the matter is, outer space is so amazing. There's this celestial anomaly in outer space, a very special star. It's called a neutron star. Would everybody say neutron star? A neutron star can be heavier and weigh more than all the continents on the earth put together. It can actually weigh more than 200 billion tons. And it fits inside a teaspoon. A neutron star can weigh more than 200 billion tons, more than all the continents on the earth put together, and fit inside a teaspoon. Let's get even weirder. In the middle of our galaxy, there is a supermassive black hole. Now, supermassive is not an adjective I'm using like a surfer, like supermassive. I'm saying like that's the scientific term. It is technically called a supermassive black hole. In the center of our galaxy, it's 307 times the mass of our sun. So you can fit 1.3 million Earths into the sun. You can fit 9.2 billion suns into Canis Majoris, the largest known star thus far discovered. But you can fit 307 suns into this supermassive black hole in the middle of our galaxy. Now, there's a star, when it nears in its orbit, the supermassive black hole starts booking it and goes 2% light speed. There's a star, when its orbit begins to near the supermassive black hole, goes 2% light speed, 186,000 miles per second. This star starts booking it around this black hole. Now, how many of you have kids? Please raise your hand if you have a kid. If you have a kid and you leave them on planet Earth and you somehow go live next to this black hole, if you live near this black hole and you return to planet Earth after a time, your child can actually be older than you. This is called Einstein's general and special theory of relativity, that black holes warp space-time. Velocity and gravity wells warp space-time. Time is elastic. So if you leave your child on planet Earth, you live near a black hole for a time, its gravity will actually warp space-time for you, so by the time you return to Earth, your child could be older than you. You say, how does that work? That's just a theory, the theory of relativity. Let me clarify something. When scientists say theory of relativity, theory in their jargon and rhetoric does not always mean hypothesis. Sometimes it means demonstrable, proven facts. The theory of relativity is not only a fact, you use the technology of the theory of relativity every day in your GPS. To get here, I used a global positioning satellite, GPS on my phone, the Maps app. Now, what GPS is doing is it's taking its directives from a satellite up in space. Now, the satellite up in space is actually moving at a very quick velocity. Velocity warps space-time as well, warps time. Not only that, it's further away from Earth's gravity well. So time is moving slightly differently for the satellite than it is for me on Earth. So how does it make sure I don't miss my term when I'm in a slightly different time current than this global positioning satellite? It employs and deploys the mathematical equations of Einstein, the theory of relativity. This is real stuff. Okay, does this fill anyone else with wonder? Because I just love, you could have a child, go live near a black hole, come back, and your child would be older than you. This is crazy stuff. One more thing, and then I'll close. Look at verse 3. Just look down at verse 3. God says, the first thing he ever says, the first thing God ever says on record in this poem is, let there be light. Let there be light. Oh, let me tell you real quick about light. This is too cool. Watch this. Light. Light is made up of energy quanta called photons. There are approximately 4 million photons per square meter. In several ways, light still baffles scientists. For example, according to everything we know about heat and corresponding color, your toaster should glow blue, but instead it glows red. Why? Nobody knows. You're using a Narnia toaster. Did you think there was a miracle in your toaster this morning? You looked at your toaster as a normal kitchen appliance, but what if you looked at it with wonder? You're like, whoa, scientists cannot figure out, according to everything we know about heat and corresponding color, why this is glowing red when it should be glowing blue. They still don't know. In fact, if you're walking by a store and it's closed, say Sunday afternoon, a store is closed. Let's say it's a sporting goods store. And you see a glove, a baseball glove, in the display window. Why is it that some photons, these energy quanta photons, light from the sun, why is it that some photons teleport through the glass to light up the glove in the display window from outside? But other photons bounce off the glass and throw your reflection back at you. So you can see your face superimposed in a fuzzy mirror on the glove at the same time. We're so used to this that we don't realize how magical that is. Scientists themselves cannot predict why some photons teleport through the glass to illuminate the glove and other photons bounce off the glass to show you your reflection. It's a mystery. What they do know is that there are 4 million photons per square meter. And what they do know is that light is in every square inch of the universe. Even in the places that appear to be the darkest, light is there. You say, well, what about black holes? They don't destroy light, they just swallow light. There is light in every square inch of the universe. You yourself contain light. The problem is your glow is 1,000 times weaker than the naked eye can register, but due to metabolic reactions within your physiological constitution, you actually glow. So you can wake up next to your spouse in the morning and you can say, honey, you glow. She might have bedhead and it might not look like it, but scientifically it's true. Say, honey, you look like $1 million. But if you go visit London, just don't say, honey, you look like £1 million. Anyways. Light is everywhere. And watch this, scientists have also figured out that light at 186,000 miles per second is the one stable element in all of existence. Everything is subject to entropy and chaos in the second law of thermodynamics. Everything's going from order to disorder. The chair that you think is solid is actually made up of subatomic particles. That's a snow flurry bouncing off of each other at such rapid rates that it looks solid, but really that's just an illusion. In fact, we are mostly empty space. You say, I know, my spouse next to me, mostly empty space. But the fact is, light, the speed of light, is the one stable element in all of existence. God says, let there be light. And then the New Testament authors say, God is light. You might have come here today and you're like, Ben, I want to live with wonder, but my world is chaotic. What can we even trust anymore? 95% of the Earth's waters unexplored? Atoms, 99.9% empty space. My own world seems entropic and chaotic. Things are falling apart. What is my constant? Would you stand with me? The band's going to come up at this time. What is solid? What can I depend on? The authors of the Bible say God is light. He is the Father of lights. There is no shadow of turning. He's not like Kylo Ren. He does not have a dark side. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So if you've lost your wonder and you've submitted your joy to the reality of chaos, listen, the Bible says God is light. The speed of light is the one stable element in existence. God is stable. He's stable. People aren't stable. That's why your hope is not found in people. Circumstances aren't stable. Our hope isn't dictated by our circumstances. Our circumstances are dictated by our hope because we are not creatures. We are creators of our circumstances. We don't let the world happen to us. We happen to the world. Offense vibes. God is the one stable element in whom we can always trust. He does not change because your circumstances do. He does not change because of the vicissitudes and highs and lows of life. He is the same yesterday and today and forever. And just as light is all but omnipresent, there is light in every square inch of the universe, 4 million photons per square meter. Just as light is everywhere, so too, so many people, when they're suffering, they say, where's God when my heart is hurting? But as C.S. Lewis said, that's like asking, what shape is yellow? The question is not, where is God? The question is, where isn't God? If I ascend up to the heavens, he's there. If I make my bed in hell, he's there. If I take the wings of the morning or dwell in the depths of Sheol, behold, you are there. Where can I escape from your presence? Even if you can't see God, God sees you. He is powerful enough to answer your prayers. He is powerful enough to heal you. He is powerful enough to create atoms out of nothingness. He is powerful enough to create neutron stars. He is powerful enough to create hundreds of billion stars in our universe. Do you not think he is powerful enough to grant you the desires of your heart as you delight in him? Do you not think he's powerful enough to cause you to receive when you ask, to open up doors when you knock, to allow you to find him when you seek him? Do you not think he's loving enough when the master of the kingdom would bankrupt the heavens to sell everything he has to buy you his pearl of great price that he found dirty in a field? He then washed in the water of his word. He went to the ends of the earth, even across, to prove just how for you he is, just how much he loves you. He is your stability. He is your creator. And now, my friends, we are besties with the Almighty. We are chill with the Creator. We are no longer servants. We are friends. We can live our lives with wonder. No more of this cynical vibe going on. Doesn't matter how jaded culture might become, we're gonna be filled with childlike awe and wonder and joy because our God is very big and he's very loving.